I grew up going to the mountains, mountain biking, skiing, just getting out there with my brother whenever I could and my family, and just feel really lucky to have grown up in that way and have that perspective of connecting with nature and all the adventures that come along with that.
Yeah, absolutely. And yet being in a city that's pretty cool. I mean, Calgary's has, of course, probably changed a lot in that time, but I think it's such a great city. So many things to do and experiences to have.
For sure. And have you had a chance to explore the mountains much since you're arrived in Calgary?
Yeah, I've been enjoying it. It actually, every time I go out there, it amazes me how close we actually are. It's just over an hour, and you're seeing these amazing, majestic mountains, and even some spots in Calgary you can see them in the distance too. So it's pretty special.
One other funny part is that now that my kids are old enough that they're starting their mountain adventures, and I think back at what my brother and I did, and I'm like, I don't know if I want them doing some of those things that we did, some of those, but it's all part of growing up and perspective and all that good stuff.
Welcome. This is Uncommon Sense, a CPA podcast presented by the Heshe CPA Knowledge Center. The Center is an initiative of the CPA Education Foundation, the charitable arm of the Chartered Professional Accountant profession in Alberta. For the record, this CPA podcast isn't about bean counting. Our episodes feature conversations with Alberta CPAs sharing their insights on a wide range of timely topics.
Well, hello, I'm Gord Beal. I'm Senior Vice President with CPA Alberta and the host for this episode of Uncommon Sense. It's my pleasure today to chat with a CPA who holds a crucial role in Alberta's and Canada's capital markets, Brian Banderk. Brian serves as the Chief Accountant at the Alberta Securities Commission, which you'll often hear us refer to as the ASC. He has joined me to talk about the work of the ASC in protecting the financial interests of Albertans, as well as his role as a CPA at the Commission. Brian has served as the Chief Accountant at the ASC since November 2022. He is also the former chair of the Canadian Securities Administrators Chief Accountants Committee. Brian is a financial, regulatory, and operational leader with over 20 years of business experience. He uses his strong technical skills and hands-on experience as a business leader to provide expert knowledge in accounting, auditing, and financial matters to further the ASC's mandate. His team provides practical guidance to stakeholders and their advisors in those areas of expertise as it relates to securities regulation. Prior to becoming the Chief Accountant, he was the Chief Financial Officer and Chief Operating Officer of privately held businesses and was the ASC's Associate Chief Accountant. He also held a senior position at a global public accounting firm in its assurance practice. Over his career, Brian has sat on a number of prominent provincial and national committees, task forces, and boards related to the accounting profession. That's a lot of background, Brian. I'm certainly looking forward to hearing a bit more about a few of those things. So welcome to Uncommon Sense, Brian.
Oh, thanks, Gord. I'm really happy to be here. I was excited when I got the invitation to join you and chat about our amazing profession.
Oh, that's great. No, I think it's fun to do these, and you and I have known each other for a little while, and it just seems whenever we get together, we have a chance to chat. It just we explore lots of things. So I'm looking forward to having this talk, and maybe before we get to discussing the Alberta Securities Commission and the work that you do. And the work that the Commission does. I'm hoping you might be able to briefly describe your career path and how you got to where you are and being named Chief Accountant at the ASC in 2022. Certainly, it's been an interesting background.
Yeah, happy to dive into that. So I guess I should start off saying that I am here expressing my individual views as opposed to official positions from the Alberta Securities Commission. And I think it's going to be a fun conversation to dive into what we do and what I've experienced throughout my career. And I actually, it's shocking when you look back and it's like, wow, I started at PwC in January of 1999, and here we are. Wow, it's like so many years later, and just a ton of amazing experiences that has challenged me, allowed me to grow. I've had so many amazing mentors along that path. And but yeah, my journey did start, my professional journey did start at PwC, where I articled and obtained my designation, as well as enjoying it so much that I'm like, I'm gonna stick around. I enjoy the atmosphere, the variety of work. So I was with PwC for about 10 years. I did take a little break in the middle of there. I did succumb to the temptation to venture out into industry. So I was with one of the large telecommunication companies for probably a little less than a year. And then I said, hey, I'm really missing what I enjoyed at PwC. And I came back and stayed there, like I said, for about a total of 9 years. And then had the opportunity to join the Alberta Securities Commission as the Associate Chief Accountant. And what I loved about that was it seemed to be a natural shift into expanding my career path, but it included all the areas I loved about being at PwC. So
That's cool.
really expand my knowledge of the capital markets, getting to work with like reporting issuers, so public companies and their advisors. So I love that. I spent, again, it seems like 9 years is my magic number. I spent about 9 years there, and I'm very, very fortunate that my partner in life is an amazing and successful entrepreneur, and was in the midst of having built and grown a couple of businesses with locations in Calgary and Edmonton. And we decided we wanted to grow our family, and it was a matter of, does she bring in someone external to kind of take over that role, or you can never really replace the founder, right? And so, but we did want to find a way to give her a little bit of a proper paternity leave or maternity leave. So at this point, I was like, hey, I've been involved in so many businesses through seeing things I loved, seeing things where I would sit back and say, if I was in charge, I would do it differently. But I never actually ran a business. And so to be able to step into that entrepreneurial world and have such an amazing mentor in my life partner to kind of guide me along the way was incredibly rewarding. When I moved over, and you mentioned it in your intro, I was given the fancy title of Chief Operating Officer and Chief Financial Officer, but
gotcha.
Really I think I should have been wearing a hat that said Entrepreneur in Training with how much I needed to learn. So, and I knew I would learn a lot, but I was shocked at how much I learned in the 4 years that I was in that role, and reached the end of that 4 years, and I said, well, wow, like I have so much appreciation for entrepreneurs and what they do on a day-to-day basis, just the breadth of what you have to know. Like there was no, to give some quick examples, there was no IT department or HR department.
You're it.
I would be up at between 10 p.m. and midnight getting laptops ready for new employees. I'd be drafting offer letters and doing the whole process. And long way of saying that if you have an entrepreneur in your life, either you're a family member or close friend, or even enjoy going to a business that is run by an entrepreneur, maybe offer to buy them a coffee or a beer, or just say, I appreciate what you're doing, because entrepreneurial spirit that we have in Alberta and Canada is just so important to our markets. And so
so much of our economy is built on the backs of entrepreneurs. We don't often realize how many entrepreneurs are major contributors to employment, to the economy more broadly, and we deal with them often, but we don't fully appreciate them maybe sometimes.
100%, Gord. Yeah, absolutely. And so I had reached 4 years, and I said, I'm not I'm not cut out to be an entrepreneur for the rest of my life. And I was really lucky that the chief accountant position at the Alberta Securities Commission was open and available. And it was always my dream when I was the associate chief accountant. It was my goal. I want to be chief accountant. And I'm actually really glad I took the time, though, of those 4 years, because it's given me a new perspective that's added into my knowledge that's, I think, is making me a better chief accountant than I would have been without that experience.
So Brian, thanks for that insight on how your path brought you to where you are. And I'm going to go out on a limb here and guess that holding the CPA designation was pretty significant in this process and probably helped you fulfill your duties as chief accountant. I wonder if you can talk a little bit about your training and experiences as CPA and how it's contributed to your success and your current role.
Yeah, 100%. And, I think people would definitely automatically recognize that obviously the experience with technical accounting and auditing and financial reporting that comes out of the CPA experience would be key to what I do. But, another piece of it that I don't think everyone would automatically think of is just the ability to interact with people and speak the language in a way that adjusts based on who you're speaking to. So absolutely, it's something that I learned or started to learn very early from my articling career, and I try to bring that to discussions that I have with whatever type of individual I'm dealing with, whether it's a lawyer, a geologist, a board member, etc. So.
Oh, that's really great. And it's interesting because your path has gone different ways along the way. And I suppose your CPA helped to open up some doors and provide the opportunities along the way.
100%. I think, anytime somebody sees that you're a CPA, it's such a well-respected designation that people have a lot of trust with. And I'm just happy that I'm part of perpetuating that and building upon that trust.
I really appreciate that. And I guess, when I think about your role with the Alberta Securities Commission, I wonder if we can turn to that for a moment. I think that most Albertans probably have heard of the ASC, but maybe not everybody. And I suspect a lot of people are not that familiar with what it does and the services it provides. So I wonder if you could provide a little bit of an overview of what the Commission's primary functions are and how it protects average Albertans. It's not just about the business. It's actually it's broader than that.
100%. And I think people that do know us often have maybe only dealt with one part of what we do, to kind of build upon what you said, Gord. And it's funny, when I first started to answer this question, I realized early on that just saying, oh yeah, we're the ASC and myself, I'm a regulator, and then you could just see people glaze over and tune out. But what we do is actually quite exciting. It's we touch on all aspects of Alberta's capital markets, is what we're responsible for, and then of course we coordinate with the other provincial securities regulators with respect to the Canadian capital markets. And so, some aspects would be public companies. So they have certain requirements in which the public needs information to make an investment decision. So we've kind of interact with what we call reporting issuers in how they prepare that or what needs to be prepared in our rules, and then making sure that those public companies are doing what they need to do so investors can make those decisions. And so that's kind of one arm of it. It's really, any time somebody is raising money in Alberta, you are actually in our securities regulations. And I think sometimes people don't even realize that. In some cases, it's built in a way that you're getting an exemption from needing to do anything, but you're still in our regulations. So I think that's something to always remember. Even if you're asking friends and family for money, there's nothing you need to do, but you are in our securities regulation.
Yeah.
Another sort of arm of the ASC that some people are aware of, but some aren't, is kind of we call it market regulation. So we would oversee the various exchanges that are out there in which public companies list. So we make sure that the exchanges are functioning in a way that supports, capital. The capital markets, as well as protects investors. So they're doing good work there. We also oversee, in conjunction with other regulatory bodies in which we've delegated some of this, those that are providing investment advice. So we would work with an organization like CIRO, who would directly oversee them, but we coordinate roles there. And of course we have an enforcement group that goes after the bad guys that are not following the rules or taking advantage. And unfortunately, that does happen. And so that's like a very high level overview of what we do.
I wonder if I could pick up on the point you were making a moment ago, and I thought about it when I was doing the introduction, the capital markets. Yeah, the capital markets, for some people, they just automatically assume this is public companies, and then they think about the big general, public companies. But it is broader than that. And I maybe just elaborate a little bit on that, because that really then brings into why this is relevant to the average Albertans. You were talking a little bit about, even if you're just going out and raising money, that there's capital markets is broad, and that's where the Alberta Securities Commission plays a big role.
100%. Like we have a team within our corporate finance division that's really honed in on entrepreneurs.
Interesting.
Because of that stuff we were talking about earlier, the entrepreneurial spirit and how important it is. So, supporting entrepreneurs, supporting business from the first stage all the way up to however far they want to progress. And, it brings up some really interesting policy debates and philosophical areas of the public versus the private markets, but we're involved in both. Like we essentially need to make sure that, as you mentioned, the capital markets as a whole are functioning efficiently and effectively, and investors are protected.
Yeah, interesting. So I guess that causes me to wonder a little bit about like the ASC as an organization, a little bit about the governance of the organizations, or under what authority does it operate, and how does it, board members, for example, get appointed?
Yeah, again, great question. It's, and I didn't even realize all of this until I stepped into this world and it really was immersed in it. Regulation of the capital markets falls within provincial jurisdiction as opposed to federal jurisdiction. And that's why you do see an Alberta Securities Commission, a BC Securities Commission, an Ontario Securities. Like every province and territory has their own Securities Commission. And because of that, as you might imagine, we're sort of granted our authority through the provincial government through what's called the Alberta Securities Act. And in that Securities Act, we then, if we want changes to that act or want to propose it, we have to propose that through the Alberta provincial government process. We also have regulations which our board can approve changes to. You mentioned our board. We call them our commission members. Those commission members are actually appointed by the Alberta government. So it has to go through an approval process. And one thing that actually is kind of a common misconception is we are a Alberta government agency, but we're not funded by taxpayer dollars.
Oh, interesting.
We're actually funded by market participants and fees to participate in the capital markets.
No, that's very interesting. And as you mentioned that, I could ask you a pretty loaded question of, why don't we have a national regulator? But of course, that's been an ongoing challenge for a long time, hasn't it? And so, maybe you could talk, if you don't mind commenting on that, but also, the relationship that exists perhaps between an Alberta Securities Commission and an Ontario Securities Commission.
Yeah, definitely. So we work together, all the provincial and territorial commissions work together under an umbrella organization called the Canadian Securities Administrators. Right. So I'll refer to that as the CSA going forward. So we do want there to be harmonized and common rules across Canada because, as you might expect, a lot of companies want to interact the capital markets across provincial borders. They're not just focusing on Alberta or Ontario or whatever. They want to look to investors across Canada. So we have this mechanism that we work really well under. We cooperate, we coordinate. There has been a push by a few different pushes over the years to create a national securities regulator. For those that have followed it closely, or if you're interested in following it, like, these are matters that have even made their way up to the Supreme Court to discuss. And, the ASC has always been really taken a very strong view that we think maintaining the provincial regulatory structure and cooperating under the CSA is best for Canada and the capital markets. And what it does is it allows, like, if you look at our capital markets, it's actually fascinating. And definitely cut me off here because I can go down a rabbit hole here. So I'll try to keep it brief. But if you look at the capital market composition in Alberta compared to BC, compared to Ontario, compared to Quebec, compared to any of the other provinces, they're all very, very different.
Diverse, isn't it? Yeah.
If you look at BC, for example, they have a massive number of public companies, but they tend to be smaller ones.
Yeah.
If you look at Alberta, we're obviously weighted towards the energy sector, and we have a combination of some very, very large public companies, multinational public companies, and then we've also been built off that sort of entrepreneurial sort of venture issuer space as well. And so, when you have such differences in the makeup of the capital markets, it's important to have those policy debates on what makes sense as a whole for everyone. And through these discussions that are very constructive and collaborative, and sometimes there's some debates, but I think we do get the right answer for the Canadian capital markets through this structure.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting. Over the years, I've had some exposure to it, and certainly some of the needs, responsibilities of the bigger public company can differ quite significantly from the smaller venture issuers or those up and coming organizations, corporations that are looking for the financing and capital. And it's quite interesting, that diversity and how Canada's capital markets address that. So I appreciate it. I want to turn it to we wish that everybody who was in the capital markets behaved well and paid attention to the rules. But sadly, I guess there are some bad actors out there, and I suppose that's part of, as you mentioned earlier, the reason why the ASC exists. I wonder if what sorts of complaints does the ASC deal with? I wonder if you can give me some hypothetical examples. I know you probably can't necessarily get into anything specific, but something that gives people a sense of what kind of complaints they would maybe be able to make or that have happened.
Yeah, so if we kind of step back and think of how we might proceed to a sort of an enforcement action, it could come through really what I'll call two processes very broadly. Is maybe our internal team is taking a look at through a review, say it's like a reporting company, a reporting issuer, a public company, and maybe we notice something that's off. That might be a trigger that investors have been misled through disclosure, sort of, I guess if you want to use plain language, they've almost been tricked into putting their money into something that they didn't have a clear picture of. Now, the other way, and I think probably more what you're getting at through your question is public complaints.
Right.
So, if an investor feels like, wow, I was told that I would invest in this business venture, my money would be used in a certain way, and I would be guaranteed returns, right? That's always a massive red flag. I haven't seen a thing, and I've received no communication. I haven't. I've reached out, and I need somebody to help me because I don't know what else to do. And so we do take complaints of that sort, and then it kind of sparks an investigation to see what happens and what's occurred within that business venture that has left this investor feeling like they've been taken advantage of.
And are there what kind of repercussions can come from that? What sorts of are there punitive measures that the ASC can impose in a situation like that?
So it kind of gets really interesting with how our enforcement group has to, our enforcement group kind of takes things from the complaint stage where they would assess it, determine whether an investigation is necessary, depending on how that investigation plays out, make the interesting decision as to whether to pursue that through some sort of enforcement action. And the reason I set that stage is because what they're determining they want to do with what to pursue with it depends on what course they take. So, for example, the ASC, we have our own, I'll call it, it's a hearing room. I'll call it our little courtroom within our offices. And we would have our commission members, a subset of them would become a panel that would essentially become the judges in these hearings.
Interesting.
So if we go that route, then the outcome could be penalties, so financial penalties. It could be bans from certain activities, or an outright ban from the capital markets if that panel decides that that's what is just in the situation. What we can't do though is enforce or put upon people jail time.
Right. Gotcha.
So what we can do though, and what we do is work very closely with those that can pursue that path, and it does impact the activities that our enforcement team will do depending on that decision. So that decision actually probably has to get made earlier than what a lot of people think.
Well, that's something I suspect we could talk for some time about, but I suspect it gets pretty technical. And I'm hoping and thinking that, the bad actors are the rare ones. It's the good ones, the good organizations. And I just wonder if briefly you could talk about the obligations and responsibilities that, the average business has and when they're really in this context in terms of reporting to the ASC.
Yeah, and again, it feeds back to what part of our what role they play within the capital markets. So if you're a public company, you're going to get into specific disclosure documents that need to be filed. If you get into, this is a massive area, Gord, of what the responsibilities are. If you're kind of in the market regulation side of it, there's certain things exchanges have to do and how they interact with us. If you're in the investment advisory side, there's rules that to even be in that space that have to be followed. So it's if you take a look at our securities regulation, it's an orange book, and it's not massive.
It's not straightforward.
It's massive.
Yeah.
And,
we don't have enough time probably to get into all the things that probably companies have to do. But it's if someone's looking to invest, or if someone's looking to start up a company, for example, or maybe incorporate, they really should do their homework. It sounds like, and I think there are even courses out there to help them understand what are their responsibilities in this.
Yeah, absolutely. And, education is a big piece of what the ASC...
I was wondering that, yeah.
The ASC does, for sure.
Yeah,
and it goes as far as, starting with the investor themselves. Hopefully people listening to the podcast have also heard some of the campaigns that the ASC has put out around Check First. We have a Check First campaign. And really, all this effort of a necessary effort of pursuing the bad guys, ultimately, if we can get through to people and say, this is what you should watch out for, and don't get fooled by this, because these are sophisticated frauds in some cases, and the way that technology is now being used to facilitate them. So it kind of starts with that base level education. And then even with our public companies that we regulate, the ASC is really not about that approach that could be seen that some regulators might take, like, we caught you.
Yeah, right.
That's not us.
No.
We're very much about trying to work with market participants. And, we do a lot of webinars and seminars, and we're out there in the public saying, these are our expectations. This is great. And then we're also saying, call us. If you're in a
you're there to support.
Challenging transaction and you want to talk through the requirements, we'll talk with you. We'll talk with your advisors. And so everyone knows what the obligations are, so we don't all run into a problem down the road.
Well, you mentioned technology, and I suspect that the world of finance investment is changing. I mean, we artificial intelligence, technology in general, and I suspect there's. I wonder if there are, what kind of opportunities, maybe risks are out there. I'm going to look into your crystal ball over the next 5 to 10 years that you see as sort of emerging issues and opportunities for the ASC.
Yeah, so the technology side is really interesting because it's creating a lot more ways for those that are trying to take advantage of the system to do so. There's, fraudulent websites popping up all the time. But you're right, it's also an opportunity for us, because what better way to battle technology than with technology? And so, we are, as the ASC, as well as coordinating with amongst the others in the CSA, developing and thinking, how do we use technology in the most efficient and effective way to basically take down, I'll use the example of these websites, to identify them and take them down quickly. Like that's, I think that's a goal that would be, if we can get more efficient at the takedown using technology, then for sure, that's what we're trying to pursue.
Fascinating. Well, I mean, there's things here we could talk about for a long time, and unfortunately, we're starting to wind down here. But I do want to come back to maybe your role as chief accountant. If you can talk a little bit about that, but very briefly, also maybe if you can tell me, what do you love most about your job, and what's fun, and maybe what's a bit of a challenge in that, because I'm sure that's a big role.
It's a big role. It's a fun role. I love the variety. I love that a lot of it is about relationship building. It's about working through challenges and issues with those that are equally concerned about the capital markets. And, like I talk a lot with the international and the Canadian standard setters when it comes to accounting and auditing and even sustainability. I get to have those discussions. I get to chat with those that, such as CPA Alberta and, the health of the profession, because CPAs are so fundamental to the health of the capital markets. They take such a role in, building and undertaking and delivering on those securities regulations that we've made. And so, the collaboration of just a lot of times, we talked about the bad actors, but I think you made the point a little earlier. The vast majority of the discussions are all with the people who are all looking to do a great job, who want to create a safe environment for people to invest in, that believe in what the product they put out, not trying to take advantage of people. And so, all of the discussions that I'm able to have that are collecting the different points of view, so many of them are like, oh, I didn't realize that by doing this, this is the impact here. It's like, okay, well, now that we know that, let's work together to overcome that challenge. So it's feeds back to those core skills that you build as a CPA, which are speaking the right language so everybody's working together for the best possible outcome. And I love that. I think it's great. And there's big challenging issues that are fun to tackle and collaborate with specialists on. And I
never a dull moment.
Enjoy it for sure. Yeah,
that's great. Well, I think we're at the end. Unfortunately, I think we could talk forever. I always enjoy our conversations, and to have had this opportunity to work with you, Brian, on this and get a chance to hear a little bit about you and a little about the ASC has been really interesting. I suspect that When you were in university, you didn't dream about becoming the chief accountant of the Alberta Securities Commission, and it's been interesting to hear your path. And I really appreciate you sharing that with us. I thank you so much for the insightful thoughts that you shared with us, the time that you've taken to share a little bit about the ASC, and knowing that some of these issues can get pretty technical. You did a really nice job, and I just want to say thanks on behalf of our audience. The ASC is such an important part of the Alberta financial landscape, and the work that it does and the work that you do is critical for all Albertans. So thank you for your time today.
Oh, thanks so much for having me. It was a blast. And yeah, I could talk forever.
Yeah, time went too quickly.
Yeah, exactly.
Thanks, Brian.
Thank you.
The Uncommon Sense podcast is presented by the CPA Education Foundation and funded by the Heshe CPA Knowledge Center. The Knowledge Center was created through a generous donation to the CPA Education Foundation by the late Brian Heshe. Brian was a distinguished Albertan, business leader, CPA, educator, and community builder. His generosity and commitment to education underpinned his good works across Alberta throughout his lifetime. We would like to acknowledge that the CPA Education Foundation offices are situated on the traditional Treaty 6 and Treaty 7 territories and Métis Nation homeland. The Foundation acknowledges that we reside on traditional and ancestral territories of many Indigenous, First Nations, Métis, and Inuit peoples. Their histories and culture influence our community to this day. The CPA Education Foundation is committed to helping build a province where Indigenous people and their voices and experiences are heard, valued, respected, and celebrated. Technical and recording services for this podcast provided by Wolf Willow Studios in Edmonton. If you enjoyed this podcast, please be sure to like, subscribe, and tell your friends about us. If you have any comments on the podcast, write to us at cpaef@cpaalberta.ca. To learn more about the CPA Education Foundation and the Heshe CPA Knowledge Center, visit cpaalberta.ca/foundation. Thanks for listening.